Oh, it's too funny. I'm here laughing. With all the stuff I gotta do, and I'm doing updates, just, why are you still at the house? It's 2 o'clock. I'm never here at this time. I think it's, yeah. My daughter had her vehicle got wrecked like a week ago, so she has no car. I have my motorcycle, thankfully. So sometimes, like, there's panic that people have. So my wife and daughter, who were in my wife's car earlier, look, I know mechanic stuff, and people don't take my advice. We're going to get the Zuckerberg and Comey's on the run, and Mueller is Manafort's heading to the pokey. So anyway, today I was doing some of those videos, and obviously I'm doing another one. But I'm never home like at about noon. But I was running late doing videos. So then my phone rings, and it's my wife and my daughter, and they're in a panic. Where are you at? Where are you? I'm. What do you mean? I'm in the yard, and I actually had my phone on me because I was doing the videos. Oh, you're home? You're home? They were in the house, or they were out front, panicking. Well, what's up? Oh, the car. Okay. So my daughter comes in. Oh, Mom's car. It sounds like the motor. Let me listen to the car. It's parked in the street. Like something happened to the car. So I said, just drive it for me around the block. Okay, the caliper went out. The brake caliper is and it's squeaking. It's not a big thing. I used to fix that myself. So I said, well, my good mechanic, Oscar, mechanic, but normally I got to take it down there. And, my wife's like, well, could it drive like this? Look, take my advice. I can drive it like that. I said, you can use it today until, take it tomorrow. But then they call back. I got a tow truck. I'm going to get a tow truck. Tow trucks. Do what you guys want to do, okay? Do what you want to do. If the phone, I got the airplane mode on so they can't call back. I said, if you let me take care of it, I'll drive it myself. Then I'm updating my Roku, my TV system, because it wasn't working. So I had bought a new Roku machine. Oh, and then you got to put, the internet, and then it's a different system now. And then at the top of all that, I got Zuckerberg coming after me. So I'm actually doing this, but I sent one text. I said, look, you guys are in panic mode. Of course, you know where they get that from. I said, just relax. And how's my daughter going to get there and there? And how are you going to pick her up? And you got to drop her off and then pick. I said, I'll just let her use the car. I'll give her the keys to my vehicle and let her use the car. Instead of picking up, dropping off, doing, oh, that's right. John will use his motorcycle. So anyway, I was doing a little bit. I'm looking at the news and my phone was ringing. Manafort is arrested today because Mr. Mueller said Mr. Manafort was obstructing justice. If I look honestly at the whole scene of many of the things that have gone on, that's consuming the news cycle, that's consuming any honest view of what happened with the Clintons. It's not just harping on the Clintons. One of the crimes, Mr. Sean Hannity, and I watched them all. Trust me, I watched them all. Last week on his radio show, he said, and I didn't hear it on his show, I saw it on these clips I watched. He said, can you imagine if the people that Mr. Mueller is investigating, whether it's Manafort, Trump's family now, because of the corruption in the New York City region, that those criminals continue, Spitz is down, the next guy's down, who told his black girlfriend, beat her, and said, call me master, black woman. That was the last AG out of New York City. What's his name? Schneiderman. That's what he did. He had a black girl, and he beat her until she called him master. And the media now is reporting that as unfounded accusations. What an unbelievable... And that's all of the media, which is such a disgrace. Any fair analysis of the things... We're embroiled in things right now that honestly we should not be embroiled with. and the whole Facebook thing you see me talking about, it actually is this whole Russia collusion narrative that entangled that. And so before you go arresting people and doing raids, every single person that watches media would tell you that when you were raiding homes of some of Trump's people at 2 in the morning and frisking their wives in bed and scaring the hell out of those people, picking the lock on the front door of a man who worked for Trump. Granted, you're going after the guy, we get it. But what about if he had kids in that home and you entered in on a no-knock raid with weapons, and say if somebody didn't know who the hell came in their home and some innocent wife has a gun for protection and heard somebody in that house that night, the Manafort raid, picked up that gun, you would have murdered his wife in self-defense because you're a debacle that you've done those things. You, the Mueller group, the Comey guys. I saw Comey's book in the Walmart the other day, A Higher Loyalty. I'll tell you that guy's going to go to prison for some of the stuff he did. And Mr. Schumer, Chuck Schumer, a top leading Democrat out of New York City, you know what he said the last few days? He said, this report, the IG Horowitz report, it has nothing to do with deep state going after anybody. That's like a joke that people would collude or whatever. And Schumer himself said on national TV, if Trump goes after the FBI or the CIA with his tweets, Schumer himself said, they have 6 ways from Sunday to get you. Now, if you ask that liar, Mr. Schumer, who lied that he loved the immigrants, crying on TV, but yet there's video of him saying, these illegal immigrants, these DACA kids, never forget they're criminals. That's what Mr. Schumer alludes to. And never forget all of these wonderful Jewish New York attorneys, according to Scripture, whoever denies that Jesus is the Christ, this is Antichrist. And that's exactly what they deny. And I would just simply say, these people purport to be people for justice. All of these media people. And I watch all of this. And the whole MSNBC thing. Matthews himself sexually harassed women, had a history of it. And he sits there as a talking head. Rachel Maddow, I don't criticize you for being an open lesbian. I have lesbian friends, I have gay friends, and I don't criticize them for that. But yet you continue to purport conspiracy theories on an MSNBC, which really was the cause of De Niro saying F Trump, because they watch all that in the Northeast. And then she said that the promise of Mr. Trump, that we're going to stop doing the war games. Our war games that we've been doing for all these years, and right off of Korea, and right there. We do them every year to show of force and all this. Obviously, the leader of North Korea, if he's going to dismantle his nuclear stuff, they always felt that those war games were wrong and like a threat. And it would just be the only reasonable thing to do for Mr. Trump to say, you know what, we're asking North Korea for a lot to dismantle. Okay, the honest view, if you're just viewing things from an honest view, it would be okay for us to say, we're going to stop doing those war games. And Rachel Maddow said, that's a cover-up. It's a Russian blackmail of Mr. Trump that he is doing that as a cover-up because the Russians don't want the war games. You're not media. I don't critique your lifestyle, Miss Maddow, but you are. It is this lunacy, and some refer to it as the Trump derangement syndrome. And you are lost in any fair analysis of news or media. The Manafort story is a newsworthy story because Mr. Mueller actually felt like Manafort He's out on the parole or probation and all. But the only reason they're really charging this man with all of the past things is simply because it's an attempt, and the media reports, to get him to flip, Manafort to flip. Like they got a bunch of stuff. All of the documents that they looked at showed there's really nothing about it. And most of the American public, if I did a brief analysis of the lunacy of it, the Russian collusion story and the FBI and Comey and his people beginning this investigation, one of the key platforms to say, let's investigate Mr. Trump, was called the Russian dossier, which was actually information provided to our intelligence agencies, which said Mr. Trump did a lot of bad things in Russia. Okay, so these documents made it into our intelligence agencies to begin getting FISA warrants and other things on U.S. citizens because they said it might mean that Trump colluded with Russia. But what was this document called the Russian dossier? It was bought, purchased, and paid for by the Hillary Clinton campaign and the Democratic National Committee. And they had a man, a British spy by the name of Steele, that they hired to obtain this information at great expense, much breaking every campaign finance rule in the book by funding that by the DNC. And it was this document was obtained through illegal Russian collusion by the Clintons that began the, quote, investigation of Trump for, quote, illegal Russian collusion. And I know most of the public would think that's almost ironic, isn't it? It surely is. Mr. Steele was not a registered lobbyist, and he was a foreigner, an ex-British spy who was hired, and he had contacts that the Democrats had him in contact with actual Russian people. And the Russians pulled the wool over their eyes more than once, even the FBI and others. They had fake stuff promised, and our government was paying money to get some of these things. And some of these Russians that want to get money, they will provide. You want stuff on Trump? Here's the whole thing. How many more hundreds of thousands you Democrats going to pay us? Now, it's in that whole thing that led to us now saying we're going to get down to the bottom of if there was any Trump collusion with Russians. And the very documents that we used, besides the other stuff I mentioned this last year, were actually obtained by illegal Russian collusion by the Democrats. Never forget that. And you'd think the media would be, I'll tell you, if you just had one of these things, if you had evidence that Mr. Trump instructed Attorney General Sessions to illegally hack into the computers of reporters, you'd have an immediate impeachment and resignation. But yet Mr. Obama did that with Eric Holder. And this is the group of the Comeys and all these guys. And Clapper. All of these men lied multiple times to Congress, broke many laws, lying to the FBI, and they're all running scot-free. It's because and the media empowers them to get away with a lot of that stuff. Christopher Wray, the leader of I could go on and on. So, this is like the little number, whatever one. Don't worry about the car. Don't get tortured. I think rightfully we got the arrest of Manafort. Enough came out in this last recent day where you had that FBI agent who was highly influential in the exoneration of Hillary Clinton and then began the investigation of Mr. Trump. His text said things of the nature, we will stop Trump. That man should be immediately fired, this Mr. Peter Strzok, the adulterer. And those of you that think that because he had this type of an affair going on, and that, well, that these things are all acceptable. What's not acceptable is you thinking you could use your power, which Mr. Schumer admits that you use when he said they have 6 ways from Sunday to get you. And Schumer would lie to you today if you asked him to his face. What did you mean by that? Did you mean that they have power and ability behind the scenes to target who they will when Mr. Rod Rosenstein threatened the congressional staffers in this investigation? And Mr. Rosenstein said, we're going to subpoena all your texts and everything. That was a threat. That man should be removed. Mr. Rosenstein should have never even been the Deputy Attorney General on this case who authorized Mueller. Why? Because part of the thing that's being investigated is considered obstruction of justice on Mr. Trump. Meaning, did he fire Mr. Comey in order to obstruct justice? The key piece of physical documentary evidence for the firing of Mr. Comey came from Rod Rosenstein. Rod Rosenstein wrote a paper, gave it to Trump, and said, based on this, there's justification to fire Comey. Okay, part of the evidence in the possible obstruction of justice case would be, did you use Mr. Rosenstein's recommendation to fire Mr. Comey? Or did you have other motivations, Mr. Trump? Rosenstein would be a key witness in the very case that he's, quote, empowered Mr. Mueller to investigate. That is one of the biggest. You would never have that. You would never have a person that could be a key witness in the actual case who deputized the main prosecutor in that case. Anybody with any knowledge of anything. Well, why doesn't the media tell us what you just told us? Because they're fake. They're fake from morning until sunset. They're fake. They're fake. The Chris Matthews, the Rachel Maddows, the Joe Scarborough, who a woman died in his congressional offices right before he retired, found her dead in his office, Joe Scarborough. And then he went on Don Imus out of New York City and joked about it and said, oh, that's the woman I had sex with and murdered. And these people are still even on the air? Well, that's because we have our own. That's correct. You have your own bias. And you're fake. All right? That's number 3.